Hi and welcome back to my workshop. I'm Tony and I'm building another tank. As you know, it's the M26 Pershing tank from Armortek, another 1:6 scale full metal tank. And when we last left off, I was starting to consider what am I going to do about, or the stage where I start priming and painting this hull. Having a good look at the instructions, there's actually quite a bit more to build before I can do that, because I don't want to keep getting the painting out and the priming out and all the rest of it. I'm going to put as much as I can onto the hull where I think it works quite well, assembled, and then paint. And then individual components such as the shock absorbers and bits and pieces like that and suspension arms, I'm going to paint separately, but at the same time when I'm prepping and painting the hull. So that said, having looked at the instructions, the next thing I'm going to put on these are the tank bump stops, or the little springs. They all come, there's different versions, and we'll go on to this in the build, but there's three different types actually. But they all have a common detail, which is this little bump spring here, which is really nicely made, and then that screws into that, or just rotates into that, and you basically Loctite that off, and everything's wonderful. However, there's 12 of these, and out of the pack, 4 of them look about right to me, about the height, but the rest of them look really compressed. I don't know if that comes out in the camera, but so I'm being a stickler for detail. I want to fix that, and I think this is right and this is wrong, but I think it's a very simple fix. So I've come up with a way of doing it, and I've got a wooden dowel, and I'm going to put it in my vise. I'll show you this in a minute. Put it in my vise. I then use my mallet, my modeling mallet, and then tap that down, and then this pushes down at the bottom to the point that it gives you the right, or the similar height to the ones that I feel that are right. So I'll go on and do that in a moment, and I'll reset the camera so we can do that. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to install as many of the components as I possibly can that I feel that once they're on the tank can be primed and painted in situ. And then we'll build that in some of these components in real time, and then I'll then start looking at, I'm probably going to start looking at putting the drive case on, the idler arms, but not attaching the idler arms, just getting them ready, assembled and ready to paint. The drive case can go on. I'm pretty sure we can put that on like I did with the Tiger, and then paint afterwards, masking off all the important parts that don't need painting or shouldn't have any paint on them. And then I'll probably go on to do the wheels, and then when I've done the wheels, we'll start looking at priming and painting before I put everything back on the tank. So slight change of plan, but I think it's the right way forward. So I'm going to set the camera up so you can see what I'm going to do to these little bump springs, and I'll be right back. Right, so I've got all my little bump springs here ready to go, and I'm just going to line the first one up onto my vise here. Hopefully you'll see this. Now you can either use a wooden dowel, and I'll put that down to a point, or I've got this amazing little pointer tool here, which is just perfect to do the job. So I'm going to first attempt at doing the one on the camera, and that's it. Hopefully you can see that now, stretching. And that's brilliant. Really pleased. That's extended out exactly what I wanted. So I'll pop that over there as one that's done, and we'll carry on. I think this is, I mean, personally, this is the sort of thing I want to do now before I put him on the tank and realise that I should have done it. That's a nice easy fix. Again, a bit unconventional, I guess. And there'll probably be people out there going, you know, what are you doing? But, you know, I want to make them, look. I've got a reference book for the M26, and it does talk about these. And that's brilliant. It's all going too well, really. And we'll go on, once I've got all these done, I'll go on and we'll start installing the various different types onto the tank. Now, this stage of the tank build, I've had a good long look at the instructions, and there are lots of components, variant different assemblies and variables of different types of components. I think that's because there's 2 thicknesses of the hull, so the components do differ, and you have to be very careful. So we'll go on and do that, but in relative normal, or sort of, you know, real time, but the rest of it I'll probably speed up. But my advice at this stage is just to read those instructions, read them again, keep reading them, and understand and mark up the various different A's and B's and the components on the tank where they're going to go, and I'll show you what I've done in a moment. And that's it. Couldn't be easier. Really pleased with that. So we'll go back now and we'll start putting these on the hull. Right, so just ahead of starting, I just wanted to check this, because one of these little bump stops, this particular one here, bridges the cast piece and this flat piece here. And because of the casting and the build-up, this is not really, that's not very level at all. It bumps in and out, which is fine. It's all part of the detail. I've checked the back of the hull. It's all flush. Everything's as it should be. I've checked it's all square, so I'm happy with the hull's been constructed correctly. But I think this is just because this you know, just some irregularities in the way this sort of the casting is worked out here. So when I put this on, this bump stop on here, which is supposed to bridge this part of it, it doesn't sit there properly. So I'm going to have to cut away a little bit of this. So I'm going to line this up and mark it. Just put that in there. That in there. It gives me a marker for where it's going to be. I'm just going to use my Sharpie just to mark that piece where I just need to get my little Dremel out. This is the first time the Dremel's been used on this build, and that's, you can see that on the camera, that's the bit that needs to come out. So as careful as I possibly can be, and get my, loaded up my Dremel already. Excuse the noise. See if that works. A little bit more coming out. We'll just check that again. Oops, put it right round, Tony. And that is pretty good. Yeah. Now that's sitting flush to this, so I'll be happily to bolt that in. So I just wanted to show you that, and while I've got the camera on as well, I've gone around and I've marked up the various different A's and B's, and it's to do with the thickness of the hull. So this is obviously the thicker hull here. So these little fittings here, which are for the really smart shock absorbers. The thinner ones, they go into these positions here, A and A, and the thicker ones, you can see that, will go on the other end of the tank where the hull is thinner. So obviously to get these out and align them. So I just thought I'd show you that. So I'll just tidy everything up, and we'll get ready to start fitting all these things onto the tank. Okay, so we're just about ready to go. Read through the instructions. The instructions are quite clear. They zoom into various areas. So the bit that we're going to concentrate on first is the front part of the tank here, and part of that is there is actually two different types of bump stops. And I'll show these in my hand. You can see that. There's the one that we used we've had to cut away a little bit of the casting there so it fits onto the front here. And that's actually designed, and it's got 6 fixings in it, although these 2 are dummy fixings, and it's quite clear in the instructions that you literally just Loctite those in. These are M3 8mm hex bolts. Just they do say to cut off the end, but there's no need to because they don't protrude past the back of that. So there's that one. Then we have this one here, which is a completely different design, as you can see. That's more enclosed than that, and there's only 3 fixings in this. However, there's also another one. So this is it looks very similar, but the difference is, I'll show you maybe this way, you can see, it's the thickness in the material. So these thinner ones go on the thicker end of the hull. These thicker ones, which are known as Bs, go on the thinner section of the hull. And actually this end here is really nicely cut out so you can facilitate that into that position. So really the only thing to do here is clean these up, make sure they're nice and clean, because you're going to be gluing these, so you need to make sure there's a good connection between both target materials. Then we've got our little springs that we've extended out earlier on, and the theory is that that just fits in there. That one fits in there lovely. So I would test fit these before you start gluing them, just to make sure that there's no issues. So with that, what I'm going to do is get my Loctite. I'm just going to use that to spread the glue around the full circumference of that, and then position this into that, and that feels right with the overlap of like out of sight. I don't know if you can see that, but it's out of sight. So that's that one. I won't fix these yet, I'll just carry on gluing these together. That's obviously one of the bigger ones at the back, so I'll carry on and probably speed all this up. That's all the bump stops now completed, and the supports for the little suspension arm, which is just really quite neat little detail. So that's for these. They don't go on yet because obviously they're going to have to be painted. Just a couple of things to note, I guess, would be when you start putting these bump stops on, some of the bump stops are packed in with these tiny little pieces of metal. And they are just finishing details, and there's 2 thicknesses that correspond with the 2 thicknesses. So you've got the thinner ones on here, and then the thicker ones at the end of the hull, where the thinner part of the hull is. These need to be thicker. They just need to be super glued into place. All I did was I just added a bit of super glue, and then using my little pointer, I was able to position that into the right place. Just make sure you clean up the main hull and the backs of these little bits of metal before you stick them, as always. So that's that. So just be careful you don't lose those. They're small parts, very easy to miss. And so that's this side. Apart from There's sort of the idler wheel, which just needs to be bolted into the hull with a series of 8mm hex bolts. And it's very, I mean, I am going to put this on now, and I will mask this part off here when I come to paint it. So again, just to recap, I'm putting all the pieces on that I feel comfortable with painting on the tank itself. One thing that has come to, and I don't know, it may not be a problem, but this little suspension arm here, obviously it goes on to this position here, but because of the overrun of these nuts or these threaded fixings, it doesn't really move. It seems to bind a little bit. So I'm going to keep an eye on that, and when I come to install the whole assembly, if I need to trim these off of my Dremel, I will do. But at the moment, I'm not going to do that. So I look forward to doing that part. So now we're just going to install this section here in real time, and then what I'll do is we'll go over to the other side and complete the exact same exercise as we've done on this side to the other side of the tank. So this is basically just 8mm hex fixings, and again, you just know that when I will be putting thread locker on these, but I just want to get the first one in. When it comes to installing these, because the camera's on it, look at that, absolutely brilliant. So that went in easier than I thought. Let's see if all the others do the same. So thread locker is required. I mean, that one I'll just put in, I will take out off the camera and do that another time. Just get these in. Again, it's just another filthy day here in the UK, and I don't know what's going on with the weather, but it's awful. But again, I'm not complaining because I've got full permission to be in here building my tank, and I'd rather do that than anything else right at this stage. So it's beginning to come together quite nicely. It's starting to look a bit more tankish now, or tankette, rather than just a big hunk of metal. And again, I'm just sort of, you know, I'm taking my time, going through the instructions, reading them thoroughly, especially with these bump stops. The amount of different fixings and sizes that you need to use for the installation of this, it's just worthwhile that little bit of time ahead. So you don't end up putting the wrong fixing in the wrong hole and what have you. And then what we're going to do, the plan today is get all these on, and if we get time, have a look at the drive case assembly, and see if we can get that done as well. But even if it's just today, getting these bump stops done and this part done, I'm happy with that. That's a decent day's build. And as I said, I'm not in a mad rush. The most enjoyable part of building these tanks is, or the whole thing about building these tanks, is the actual build itself. And when it's all finished, it's great. They're great fun to operate, but the build is probably the best part, I think, or certainly the highlight of it. And when you first bring it to, you know, when it starts coming to life. So there's the first fixing that doesn't want to play ball, but persevere. And it's always the awkward one. It's the one underneath. It's starting to get to me. I'm starting to look at this and going, this is so heavy now. I really have to start planning ahead, you know, the next part, and is it going to be too heavy to lift and all the rest of it. And I might speak to Armortek and see if I can get the battery tray that goes inside the hole ahead of the option kits, because obviously I want to get this painted. I want to paint the underside, but the fixings come through from the underside of the hole. I know you can't see it out of camera, but fixings come through the underside of the hole with these little standoffs which allow the battery deck to sit above the torsion bar system. So I may do that, but for now we'll not worry about it. Just the last one of these into here. And I'll get the idler pivot arms out in a minute. We'll have a look at those and we'll clean them up ahead of painting them. But I also want to try and just test fit everything before I paint it, to make sure it all works and there's no nothing that needs to be done to it. And again, we've got the stubborn. There's always one that doesn't want to play. There we go. I think that's in now. There we go. I didn't want to paint all these things off the tank because and there's no need. I don't think there's any need to. I mean, I can get to all of this when I'm going to turn the tank on its side. I'll be able to get to it to, you know, to edge prime it, then prime it, and then paint it. Otherwise, it's just there's going to be just components everywhere in various different stages of build, and I didn't want that. So that. I will go back and put some thread lockers in that in a moment, but just going around here, just tightening these up. That's fine now. That's fine. So that's that piece. So what we're going to do now in a moment is I'll set the camera up and we'll go over the other side, speed the whole process up, and then we'll come back and discuss the next part of the build. So we're all set to go on this side. We're now doing the right hand side of the tank. Exactly the same instructions, exactly the same fixings and method, and it's just a matter of just taking your time, being patient. The only difference is down this end is slightly different this time because it doesn't bridge the cast piece like it did on the other side, so there's no work to do on that. That'll just go straight in there as intended. So I'm going to speed this whole process up. Right, so just want to talk about the idler arm. So there's a couple of things really that we need to be aware of, and I'm going to do a test fit on this. This part will be painted off the tank, it won't be painted on the tank. But this is the first on the left hand side. Now this took a lot of cleaning up because when it goes onto this idler axle here, it needs to run smooth like that. But you need to make sure that you clean this up in the same manner as, you know, I used the sort of sandpaper wrapped around the wooden dowel to go through and clean up this and this hole here. And I've also cleaned up and deburred all of the holes. So very important, because if this doesn't run smoothly and it snags on here, I think the torsion bar system, or how this all supposed to operate, and I don't really fully understand it yet, I'm still getting my head around it, but so that's the very first thing. Make sure that that's a nice clean fit and operating as it should. So then the next thing is we have one of the axles. Now I've already made sure I've tested this, that it goes in. It was a bit tight, so I just clamped this in my vise very carefully with the vice guards on, and then just screwed it home, and now as you can see it's going in and out with really straightforward. So I'm happy with that, so I'm going to put some thread locker on that now. Now I'm not going to install these today, I just want to basically assemble as far as we can go, and then to test fit them, just to make sure that everything is working as it should, and I'm just making sure that's the right hand, and it is. With this on here, that That's gone home lovely. So that's in there now as it should be. Just wipe off the excess of... I'm trying to do this so I don't take it out of the camera. So apologies if I do from time to time take it out of the camera. So that's that as far as the axle is concerned. We've cleaned this hole up. This is clean. This is fitted off. Very nice. Now, what I want to do is I want to connect this to this particular suspension arm here. Now, part of the assembly of these suspension arms, and they don't tell you this until later on, are these little sort of, I'm going to call them cleats here, which are there to connect to the suspension forks, these things. Now they don't fit in here. When they wind in, no problem at all. They're threaded. There's a receptacle hole that's threaded. No issues with that at all. They go in, but as you wind them in, they don't wind in tight. So what I've done is I've coated it in thread locker. I've wound it in as far as it goes without sort of, you know, because you'll get to a point where it just won't land in this perfect position, which is this position here. So I'm using quite a lot of thread locker so that when that goes off, it will be nice and secure. And then the underside of it, I'll just put a dab of super glue, like the normal Loctite super glue, into this hole. Sorry, into this hole here. And hopefully that will then sit in this position. And it needs to be, you know, absolutely parallel and in line with the suspension arm, not angled. So I've done all the other suspension arms. One thing when I was doing that, I was thinking, it'd be so easy, and here's one here, it'd be so easy to put it in the wrong side. So make sure that when you're putting these pieces on, that you align the suspension arms in the position they're supposed to be, and check against the instructions to make sure that that is in. Because if you put that on, it's so easy, I guess, unless you're, you know, if you're not concentrating, to end up putting this on the underside of it, and then it's just a, you know, it's a pain to, it's not the end of the world, but it's a pain to resolve. So that's just a tip as far as that's concerned. Now what we're going to do is we're going to assemble this. I'm not going to fit anything off. I just want to assemble it and make sure it's all working as it should do. So I'm going to install, but I'm not going to secure. I'm just going to offer that into its hole, the other side of the tank. There we go, and that's in there. That's pretty much as it should be, with a flat side of the torsion bar. Now we've got to try and get this on here and get this aligned at the back, this little link here, with one of the pins, this big pin, the larger of the two pins that we talked about. There we go, that. Is that in? Yeah, that's in. Again, I'm not putting a nut on the end of that, I'm just going to push that in. So that's it kind of in its raw assembly. And we can see, look, I mean, this won't do this, but you can see there's a lot of articulation there, which is what it's supposed to have. This is too much, obviously, because once this is all secured the other end, you know, that will do its job and act as part of the suspension for sort of this main sort of idler wheel that ultimately goes on here. So that's in its raw state there. Now we've got to try and fathom out how we would connect the suspension. So this piece here goes on there, nice and easy. And this goes around that. Now, there's a 16mm, I'm going to put it the wrong way around because it just saves me messing around. This little M5 16mm threaded button fixing. That is fiddly. Let's go into there. There you go. So that's it. So let's just see. So that seems to be doing exactly what everything's articulated as it should do. I was worried about, if you remember, I was worried about this fitting binding on these threaded nuts here, but it doesn't seem to be affecting it at all. Now, if that was fixed into a position, that would do its job perfectly well. So really pleased actually how that works. I'm going to use it. Brilliant, just fantastic engineering again from Armortek. So that's it. I mean, I would recommend doing this just to make sure before you start painting all of these, elements just to test that everything works as it should. And now, you know, and then you can take it off and get ready for painting. So I'm going to take this off now, take the pin out, remove that, take the button fixing out of that, put that on my fixings tray, drop that, take that apart. This is a really neat detail, really nice, really nice. Put that back in the bag, remove my torsion bar, and that goes over on the bench with the rest of those, and that's it. Just a matter of, I think it's worth doing, just to dry fit and test fit all these components before you start, you know, painting them, and you know, trying to, whatever you do, don't force this on. As I said, make sure it's all clean and smoothly operating before you do anything with it. So now, obviously, that this part here I'll end up masking this axle off here. I think I will end up assembling the top part of this idler arm here, masking off parts of that. This will be masked off, of course, and then everything else will be primed and painted at the stage where I'm ready to do that. So really pleased I did that, and we'll move on to the next part. So we're going to carry on now with just the rest of the assembly of this idler arm, so that we know it's done and we can put that away to one side, ready for painting. So what I wanted to do is to make sure to align the main idler axle itself. The instructions are quite clear about how it should be positioned, but I want to put this on the actual tank, so that I've got the right position. So I'm just going to mount this back in again, put that pin back in there. So that's about it, and let's make sure that's aligned on its flat side, that side, and it is. So that's pretty much the setup. And then of course when this goes in, which is the main sort of idler axle itself, under its own weight, obviously that's going to be the thing that adjusts the tension of the track. Under its own weight, it sits there, and that's how it shows in the instructions. So obviously you've got to be careful where you position this, but I'm going to go exactly as per the Armortek instructions. So that's that there. So now I'm going to just pop that pin back out. I'm going to take this, hold that in that position, and then put the big spacer on the back of that, which is this. I don't think there's a right way and a wrong way to put that. Actually, I'm just looking at it. It doesn't look like it. No. No. And then there's a nut that goes on the end of that. I'm going to put another thread locker on that. Wind that in. Don't think I've got in that set. Don't think I've got one big enough for that. But, no, to get the old bigger one on that. Bear with me a second. Oops. Apologies. Just knocked the camera. I'll just tighten that off. And that's that on. I'm just going to put that back in position again, just to make sure. Let's put that pin in. All fiddly, but I think it's essential. A really important part to make sure. There we go, and position that there. So that's about where it ought to be, I think. And just checking where the flat spot is on the other side, and that's there. So that's pretty much as per, yes, as per the Armortek instructions. So I'm happy with that. So I'll just move that pin off again, take this off, and there's a grub screw that goes in here to secure the whole thing in place, and that is an M26 cap. So let's just go and get that. One thing I didn't get. Apologies. So back with my M26 cap. Some thread locker on that. Just send that home. Looking for the right size driver. Get that in nice and tight. And that is. So that's that. So that's that pretty much assembled. Now I will mask off the elements that I don't want to get paint on, but I'm happy with that because I want to get that fully painted away from the tank. I mean, it's impossible. How can you possibly put, paint this wise on the tank? So I'm going to do the next one here, but I'll probably speed that up. So that's it, assembled wise. We'll do the next one, and then I'll come back to camera. So that's it for today. Really pleased with the session in the end. Didn't get around to doing the drive case assembly, but you know what, that's for another day. What we did today was brilliant. I've got all the bump stops installed. We sorted out the springs because I had that compressed problem with the springs, and you saw how I got around that. We installed all the suspension arm supports, installed the axle for the idler arms, and most importantly we assembled both left and right hand side assembly arms, and then test fitted them to make sure that everything connects up, because there's quite a lot of connections and a lot of components that rely upon working together with this. So I'm really pleased. I've tested both sides and it's worked out brilliantly. So the next session will be the drive case assembly. I'll probably go on and do the sprocket, and I'll start doing the wheels, and I think then when I've got all of those done, then it's time to think about priming and painting. I just think it'd be easier to paint all the wheels like I did with the Tiger away from the tank, suspension arms, all these, the idler arms, everything else off the tank, and then spray the sides and the underside of the hull, and then we can put it all back on, and it'll really start looking like a tank then. It's starting to look like one now, but it will really start looking like a tank then. So I've enjoyed today. I hope you've enjoyed today's session. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe and welcome. If you're continuing to follow me, thank you. Your support is incredible. If you like this session, thumbs up. I'll see you in the next session, and it's me, Tony, and I'm building another tank. See you soon.